Some of you may have experienced the challenges of being pregnant over the age of 35 and dealing with the mainstream medical system. Well, in this video, I'm going to share with you how the medical system treated me when I was pregnant for the first time with this little baby at the age of 48. The baby Star is my first and only baby. She was created by a donor sperm because I'm a single woman, and donor egg because I was almost 48 at the time she was created, and that was in April 2021, and I gave birth to her in December 2021. And they put her embryo inside me 9 weeks before I turned 48. So I was 48 for pretty much my whole pregnancy, from 9 weeks onwards, and I was 48 when I gave birth to her. In my last video, I talked about how I felt during my pregnancy as a 48-year-old woman pregnant for the first time, and the answer is I felt amazing, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And if you really want to see that video, because you'll find it really inspiring, I'll put a link to it here, and I'll put a link to it in the description box. So I was feeling great within myself, and really the only problems I faced were external things that happened during my pregnancy to do with COVID and other things like that were out of my control. And also the challenges I had dealing with the mainstream medical system, who didn't want to treat me as a normal, healthily pregnant woman because of my age, even though I was having a really easy pregnancy. So some of you will know that the medical establishment says that a woman who's pregnant over 35 is at an advanced maternal age, and they'll call her pregnancy a geriatric pregnancy. So I'm like, if 35 is considered geriatric, what is 48? Is 48 virtually deceased? Like, what do they call me? So I didn't have to have anything to do with the medical system in my first trimester because I had perfect blood pressure, perfect everything was easy, no morning sickness, nothing. My second trimester, I was also feeling great, but I was starting to look into where I might want to give birth. I was looking into midwives, I was looking for obstetricians. I know in some countries you call them OBGYN or OB. In Australia we call them obstetricians. I was trying to figure out where I was going to give birth. Was it going to be a home birth or a hospital birth or in a birth center? And I was just trying to explore my options and find out what was available to me. And what I found out was, because of my age, I didn't have the full range of options available to me. I had a much narrower choice of options, and that was quite frustrating, especially given I was having a perfectly healthy, easy pregnancy. Some of you know, who watched my previous video about what I felt like during my pregnancy, that I did get gestational diabetes towards the end of my pregnancy, which was not age-related, but the fact that there's diabetes running through my whole family. But at the time that I was investigating birth centers and hospitals and midwives and obstetricians, this was months before then. So at this point, I did not have any physical issues at all. Perfect bill of health, perfect blood test, perfect blood pressure, perfect everything. No morning sickness, no nausea, no backache. I was totally healthy. So I was turning up and having these conversations with people really as a completely normal, healthy, low-risk pregnancy, other than my age. So at that time, I felt pretty comfortable that I might end up getting to have a natural vaginal birth. Now, obviously, I knew that anything could happen later in the pregnancy and there might be other complications, and I was totally open to that, comfortable with that. If there had been something like placenta previa or high blood pressure or anything, of course I would have reconsidered. But at the time, I was hoping that if things continued the way they were, my pregnancy stayed normal and healthy, then I would hopefully be able to have a natural vaginal birth. And I had watched a fantastic documentary, which I highly recommend you watch if you can get hold of it. It's called Birth Time. I'll put a link to it below in the description. I think I watched that sometime during my first trimester, and there was all these pregnant women there, and it was so exciting because I was like, I hardly had any bumps showing because it was really early in my pregnancy, and there was all these women with big tummies. I just couldn't believe I was sitting in a cinema full of pregnant women. I was 48, single. Like, it was a miracle that I was pregnant. I just couldn't believe I was sitting in a room with all these young girls who were pregnant with their husbands. It was just bizarre. But anyway, it was a spectacular documentary. Super interesting. I'm not one for conspiracy theories or anything. I have a very balanced view. I feel that there's a big place for mainstream medicine. I feel there's a big place for alternative medicine. I like to dance between the two of them and walk a very middle path. So I wasn't going there to go, down the hospitals! That's really not how I think. Anyway, this is over a year ago now, and I've had a baby since then, so I don't remember it 100% perfectly, but I remember that it made some very good points about how when women are in charge of their own birthing process, rather than the hospital being in charge of it, they tend to have a much less stressful, much less traumatic time, and that when they are allowed to have either a home birth or a birth in a birthing center surrounded by midwives, rather than in a conventional hospital setting surrounded by doctors, that they tend to have a much less traumatic experience and they feel a lot more empowered and there tends to be a lot less medical intervention, and often they come out of it with a much more positive birth experience. So I was hoping that I'd be able to have some choices around my birth so that I could hopefully have a natural vaginal birth, or maybe a gentle cesarean, which is a different kind of, less mainstream kind of cesarean that is not always available at a hospital. I was hoping that I'd have some options available to me and that I could feel empowered in my birth and maybe have midwives around me rather than doctors. Of course, I wasn't attached to this. As I said, if some conditions had developed later in my pregnancy, of course I would have gone to a hospital. But at that point, as I said, I had a really normal, healthy pregnancy. So I was wanting to see what options I would have. By the way, if you don't know what a gentle cesarean is, it's an amazing thing. It's not available everywhere in the world yet. And I will actually make another video about it, because I actually ended up having baby Star via a gentle cesarean after a day of labour. And it was absolutely amazing. So I will make another video telling you what a gentle cesarean is. But at this point, I was open to a natural birth or a gentle cesarean. I just wanted to know what my options were. Oh, I got lipstick on you. And at that point, I really felt that giving birth in a birth centre was one of the best options for me, because I live very, very far from a hospital. It's an hour south to a hospital and it's an hour north to a hospital. In an ambulance, it might be like 45 minutes. And because of that, I really wasn't wanting to have a home birth, because if something went wrong, it would be a long way to get to a hospital. And I didn't really want to have a hospital birth because I didn't really want to have to drive to a hospital for an hour while I was in labour. So for me, a birth centre seemed like a better idea. And there are some birth centres fairly close to me, like 25 minutes away. And they have an amazing reputation. And most of the women that I know, my friends, my friendship circle who live in this area, kind of hippie part of Australia where I live, they had all given birth at one of the local birth centres, and a lot of them had an amazing experience. They felt that it was very midwife-led, it was focused on the wishes of the mother, it was not that medicalised. And if something turned medical and there was an emergency, there was an arrangement that the birth centres would get the woman by ambulance to one of those two hospitals, north or south. So the birth centre was connected with the hospitals, and to me that felt like a really safe middle approach where you could start attempting a natural birth supervised by midwives. If something went wrong, you'd end up at the hospital. So that's really what I wanted to do. So I rang both the local birth centres to see if I could book in and meet the midwives, and I was told by both of them in no uncertain terms that I was not allowed to birth there because of my age. They have a cut-off at age 42. And I said to them, but I'm having a perfectly easy pregnancy. I don't even have morning sickness. My blood pressure is normal. All my tests are normal. I'm in perfect health. They said, we're sorry you're considered high risk because of your age, even if you're having the world's most perfect pregnancy. So that was really disheartening and really disappointing. And I'm not someone who gets upset. I very rarely get depressed. I'm a very, very positive person. But I remember having a day where I felt really defeated and really flat. And I actually booked in to see a woman who's a birthing coach. She was fantastic. I've heard about her from a few other mothers I know who are over 40. She's kind of a bit of a mix between a wise woman and an empowerment coach and a healer and a belly dancer, and she teaches you all these exercises you can do for natural birth. She's just an amazing birth empowerment coach. So I was so upset after finding out I wasn't allowed to birth in a birth centre, because I was like, oh my God, does that mean I have to do a home birth in the middle of nowhere in the rural area, not near a hospital? Or does that mean I have to do a full medicated hospital birth? I felt like I had no other option. So I went to see her, and she was actually fantastic, because she had actually given birth to her third child at age 47, totally naturally. No egg donor, no cesarean, nothing. Like, she's just one of those amazing women. Obviously, she wasn't single, so she didn't have to do IVF, so she got pregnant naturally. From what I understand, it's a bit easier to get pregnant at an older age naturally. It's a lot harder if you're trying to do an IVF in vitro process, because that's much more invasive on the egg, and older eggs don't tend to stand up to IVF the way older eggs stand up to natural sexual intercourse. So she'd gotten pregnant naturally through normal marital relations and had her baby at 47. And she breastfed for quite a long time, and she's quite a really amazing woman. And she really encouraged me just to stay centered in myself. She reflected back to me all the advantages of giving birth at a much older age and being an older mother. Exactly. She reminded me how much wisdom I have, how much maturity, how much self-knowing, how much trust I have of following my own guidance. And she pointed out that this whole miracle of being pregnant with this miracle baby had happened because I'd followed my inner guidance, I'd followed my inner knowing, and that I just needed to keep doing that. And that would help me make the decisions about which midwife, which doctor, which birthplace, which situation would be the best for me for a healthy birth. And I really heard her, and I took that on board. She also had great faith in me that I was going to continue to have an easy pregnancy, that I was going to have an easy birth. So I'm really grateful to her for that. Just one little moment in time where I needed a bit of encouragement. The rest of my pregnancy, I didn't need anything like that. But just after hearing from those birth centres, I definitely needed that pep talk and that belief from someone who had already walked in my shoes. And that's one of the reasons I make these videos, so you can see someone else who's already walked in your shoes. If you're an older woman wanting to get pregnant, or you're an older woman who's currently pregnant, I did it, you can do it too. And I saw that she had done it, and I knew I could do it too. So I'm glad I saw her, because the thing that happened next was even more confronting than the birth centres rejecting me because of my age. But luckily I'd had this pep talk, so I was feeling quite strong within myself. In part 2 of this video, I'll share the stressful encounter I had with the mainstream medical system because of my age, and how I was treated by other medical professionals during the rest of my pregnancy.